What does it look like to fuel well? Is it the perfect diet? Is it all or nothing? Is it really just a food thing? To finish our discussion about good energy by Casey Means, we tackle the 6 most influential areas and share specific recommendations to minimize bad energy and maximize good.
Welcome back to AtoZrunning, where we help runners thrive with information, inspiration, and coaching services. I'm Andy.
And I'm Zach, and you can find out everything about what we do here at AtoZrunning by visiting AtoZrunning.com. And follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and we have some Instagram as well. We're sharing, in particular, most of our content on YouTube currently. So if you want to get everything.
And you may have noticed we've started to do things a little bit differently, and your feedback is welcomed. We are splitting the running news with our main topics.
And our hope here is multiple fold for this. One, so that you will just spend more time listening to AtoZrunning. That's really what everyone wants to be doing. Anyway.
He's being funny.
And two, and probably the actual reason, is we find that as we have asked you all questions like what segments are your favorite and what do you like to listen to at certain times or for certain reasons, all that kind of stuff. Most of you have different reasons you like to listen to different segments that we cover. And we thought, what if we just have multiple episodes so you can listen to the segments you like at the times you want to in specificity. And so we're trying something. Who knows? Maybe you find that this is not your favorite way for us to be sharing content, and just let us know, as you are wont to do, and we like it. Mm-hmm. So that's the rule. People with strong opinions are likely going to share them.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to hearing those strong opinions. But if you missed it, we shared a couple of different things in the last few episodes. And so a couple of our running news episodes recently, like the World Indoor Championships and others, you definitely want to catch those. We also added a new segment at the end of the running news stuff that is really fun, where we ask AI to ask us trivia questions and we see if we can get them right. It's a blast, among other things, right? And also the running news episodes are where we will share things like updates about what we're doing as we're trying to train our bodies ourselves and get into some form of fitness at different times. And so if you're interested in those types of things, those kinds of updates, the running news is like the regular current event type of stuff in what we do and what the world is doing and all of that. And then these episodes are what is some topic on our minds that we feel will help runners in training, in general wellness. Remember our big 3, right? Our big 3 are channeling our energy, our aerobic condition, and our general strength and mobility. And so that's the stuff. When we start to think to each other about what should we share, what should we cover, what should we do for an episode, it always comes back to something around those areas. So that brings us to today's episode. And what we did in part 1 of this episode was we brought to you the book Good Energy by Casey Means. And this one is along the vein of general health and wellness. It includes everything. And she is writing from the perspective of we need to be doing better things. There's a lot of things we do, like we as a society and individuals do, that are not healthy for us. And so she lays out the case, and that's what we shared in the first episode. These are all the things that are not healthy for us. And then she goes on to now say, here's what we should do about those areas. And that's what we're doing today. Before we get to that, though, we should be transparent with you. This topic has brought about some disagreements between Andy and Zach as well. And I think that's just great, because as long as we are trying to bring some intellectual humility to these things, I'm speaking to myself right now, it's important to not accept at face value everything someone claims about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would thought I was going to get to just share my rebuttals and we could move through it that way. But I guess you're all going to know that It might have ruffled my feathers a little bit. And I'm not saying because I don't agree with things, but I am more skeptical when it comes to things that I really enjoy that I don't want to give up or changes that I don't want to make. So I think it's good to come with a critical mind, but also a mind that's willing to look for some ways that we can make positive changes for our health.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the main reasons you are going to disagree is because you don't want to be told that the thing you like is bad for you?
That ruffles my feathers for sure. But I also think that there has been a lot of conflicting messaging.
True that.
I don't always look at someone's work and say that's everything correct and everyone else is wrong. So
that's one of those. We'll talk about kind of in summary at the end here, our summary of Casey Means' work in particular. But anytime someone says, I have the right answers and everybody else has been wrong all of these many hundreds of years, that is a kind of red flag because there's no way that's true. There's no way it's true that you just now figured everything out that no one else has figured out, right? And so that's not what this author is doing, by the way. But at times it tends to feel like that with these kinds of books. And so we have to be careful. The other thing that we always keep in mind when we're thinking about the topic of health, wellness, and food in particular, because like nutrition, because that's always going to be a center point to a health and wellness text. Actually, it was the author herself who noted the specifics around this, but we've all been aware of this for some time. There's been a lot of research in the industry of health, wellness, and nutrition. And it's often exactly, what's the word?
Contradictory?
Contradictory to other research. And both claim to be right and both claim to have done rigorous research to prove their point. And so the exact number that Casey Means provides is from years 2020 to 2022. So I guess it's a 3-year span, but it might have been more like a 2.5-year span, I believe. There were 46,000 research studies published during that time on health, wellness, and nutrition. And so in those 46,000, you have to say, okay, there's a good chance that there's a lot of things that prove the exact opposite of a lot of other things. But more so, even further, is how many of those studies were a special interest group funded or special interest group promoted effort. And so you get things like a health and wellness company that is really trying to demonstrate why taking certain kinds of vitamins is a very important thing. They're going to conduct studies and they're going to find groups that will research certain things, and they're not going to publish those studies unless it helps their case, right? And so maybe the study doesn't prove their point, then they're just going to sit on it. that's the norm. But then how about the big food companies and things like things like the government agencies? I'm trying to remember what these things are called. Nonprofits. That's the word. And so what they're going to do is they're often going to partner and say, okay, this food company has tons and tons of money and they like funding research on food because it's important for them. And so we'll do that, but they're often demonstrating results that other people will say, really? Is that really what you found? And then you look and you see who funded it and you're thinking, I'm not so sure I trust that. And so a healthy skepticism, as Andy said, is good and necessary. Mm-hmm. And Andy will help me stay skeptical enough. And people are listening right now and they're saying, Zach, aren't you just like the classic pessimist and cynic about everything? And the answer is yes, but I also sometimes get carried away. And
he also likes to have handles on things. Like he likes things to be clear. And so there is some of the more rigor of a regimen that he enjoys. And so if someone can tell him things to do and things to avoid, he's more likely to jump on that, right?
Yeah, that may be true. Okay, well, enough preamble. Let's get on to talking about how to fuel well. All right, so we promised a practical side of the discussion today, and that's exactly what you're going to get. First, keep in mind that everything we're about to share is the author's recommendations. And so we'll react to and reflect on these things. But what we're trying to do is say, what does this author say we should be doing to help provide what she calls good energy for our bodies? And within that, we'll have a few thoughts and reactions to those things. But I should mention that her approach is comprehensive. It is all inclusive. And so I said at the outset, we're talking about the 6 key areas. And now you're thinking, well, what are those? Well, the first one is food, which is probably the most obvious thing, because your body creates energy from the things you're eating. And so we're going to talk about what it means to have good energy from the food we're eating. And then also the other 5, which are not always quite as obvious. Sleep. Okay, I guess that's kind of obvious. Movement, which as runners, that's one of the reasons why we like to gravitate toward these kinds of things, because that's an area that we probably do fairly well. And then light, temperature, and general toxicity. Those are her 6 areas. And you're basically saying, okay, that probably just covers like all aspects of life. And that's probably true in some sense. First, before we get into it, the worst thing to do with this book, Good Energy by Casey Means, is what I did, which is I immediately flipped to her checklists of, are you doing well with these types of things? And it's like 7 pages of constant checklists, categorical checklists. And it's like you have to get like 90% of all of these to be considered doing well. And I looked at that and I was like, this is impossible. Nobody can do that. Well, the reality is you're not supposed to try to do every single thing she's recommending all the time. I think there's an ideal world somewhere in there. But the point is, look at what I'm doing and where there are things I'm doing that are notably bad, and how can I try to replace those with better things. That's the mindset, but it's also a little bit more straightforward than that. And I think that we'll get to that straightforwardness here as we go. All right, first topic, food. And with each of these topics, the author has a particular perspective. And so we're going to share that at the outset to get a sense of what she's trying to accomplish here. So good fuel is actually quite simple from the author's perspective, but it is not easy. And there's a number of reasons for that. And mostly it's because our food industry in the Western world today has not made it terribly easy by design, not necessarily by intent, but by design. So let's talk about that. The summary of her approach is, and I quote, I'm reading from the book here, promote unprocessed whole foods and discourage ultra-processed industrial foods. And she actually writes in the book, she's like, it is really just as simple as that. Try to eat as little highly processed things as possible, and you are going to be healthier. And then she goes into a whole lot of specifics, like this food is really good for this thing. I found it really fun because it's like, well, what 17 foods are helpful for antioxidative stress? And she's got 17 recommendations, right? That's kind of fun. But if you don't want to go into those weeds, we're going to start at the concept level and think about how we can do with these things ourselves, or how we already do. Five principles here to try to achieve that goal of promoting unprocessed whole foods. So first, and these, I should say, these are like mindsets around food stuff. Food determines the structure and function of our cells and our microbiome. That's principle number 1. So the things you eat actually make your cells behave and become certain things.
You are what you eat?
Yes. You've heard the phrase, and it's like, I don't need someone to tell me that again because it's like so taboo. But then she actually goes into the science of why this is true, and I think it's really interesting. So it's like your cell membranes, right, which are the walls to your cell. They're composed of certain nutrients. Those nutrients don't come from your own body. They get them from the things you're eating. And if you're not eating the nutrients that are like what you would say the best composition of cell membrane, your cells are just going to create those membranes from other nutrients. Like, our bodies are fascinating. They do all sorts of really cool things. But the problem is certain cell membrane structures are significantly better for our overall health than others. And so what you find is things like the actual communication between your cell and the things that your cell is trying to communicate to, that all has to do with the structure of the cell membrane, how it's happening, whether it's happening in the right ways or the right things are getting through to communicate. And so an example of that is stress. We have been talking about for a while now the fascinating connection between psychological stress and physiological effect. And there's a direct link, and we've known this for years as a human society. Well, predominantly the reason why that is because psychological stress makes your brain send a signal to your cells that says, we need help. There's something wrong here. Okay. Then your cells produce a certain kind of, actually, I don't know. So I don't know exactly what produces it. I didn't get that far deep into it, but a certain kind of enzyme is produced, and then it's going to get released, and it's going to go all sorts of different places and tell all those places that something's wrong. And so that's where you get inflammation. That's where you get other kinds of physiological reactions to psychological stress. For some reason, none of the other ones are coming to mind at the moment. But in principle, if your cell membranes are composed of the best kind of stuff, then they actually preemptively detect those enzymes that are trying to get through, and they inhibit them or reduce them so that the effect of the psychological stress is significantly less physiologically. And you want to know one of the things that has a direct effect on that, which we're going to talk about actually a little bit later, is sleep. When you don't get enough sleep, those defenses are drastically reduced, which is why you get things like you get the actual results of being stressed out just from getting less sleep in your body.
I feel that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you can get a sense here of, I'm not trying to go into all the science, but what we eat is going to make those things happen or not happen the way they should. Also cell function, which is probably even more the topic that we tend to discuss. Cell structure, of course, is necessary, but cell function. So now you have things like, are your mitochondria doing the thing they're supposed to do when they're converting energy, or when they're creating energy from different kinds of molecules? And in order to do that well, you need certain nutrients. And when you don't have enough of those nutrients, then your mitochondria assume that there's a problem. And so they actually produce energy in a different way. That's not good. So we need to eat the stuff that makes our cells do what they need to do. That's one principle. Two, eating, and this is, I think this is the principle. We use the word fueling. All right. We talk about eating as fueling because in concept, that's what we're doing. That's essentially what I just described. But the principle here at a scientific level is that fueling mindset means you are matching what your cells need with the things you're putting in to your body. And so that match is essential because what your cells need is, one, not static, and two, is you need certain things more and certain things less in a kind of cyclical fashion. And so that also tells me that there are certain things that my cells don't need, but when I eat them, my cells have to figure out what to do with those nutrients, and now that's a problem. That's bad fuel, or in the case of the author, bad energy. It's the phrase she often uses. And so this quote, I think this is kind of a very helpful way to think about the principle, what we're doing here. And so she says, eating is a matching problem. Matching the food inputs with the cell's needs produces health. When we do it well, we're healthy. When we don't do it well, all sorts of things can go wrong. And most of them are not terribly significant in the moment, but over time make us unwell. So that's where we get into the processed foods discussion, especially. There are two reasons why processed foods are not great for us. One is because the process of processing food diminishes the overall nutritional value. Humans have known about this since we started doing it. It's a cost-benefit analysis, right? And I often wonder, as I'm reading through this text and others, which came first, the desire for processed foods or the creation of them? I think we know the answer to that, but we'll talk about that sometime. So what ends up happening is you take away stuff you do need from processed foods, and so you have to eat more of the food to get those particular nutrients, but then you also add in things that you don't need. And so now, in order to get what I need, I have to eat a higher quantity of that thing, and I'm also getting a whole lot of stuff that I don't need in higher quantities. And the more processed something is, the more likely that's happening. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. And this is where the author is really, she's not terribly picky with what she condemns and what she approves. She's basically just like, I mean, has it gone through, significant processing and industrial processes. And if it has, I don't think we should be eating it. It's kind of and if you're going to eat it, don't eat very much of it and don't eat it often. It's kind of the idea. And so, yes, we've known this. More natural, more raw, more organic is always better than less. But she gets into a little bit more of the rationale and specifics, which I do think is helpful. One point, I said this earlier, and this I think is another reason why we do find this author's work particularly to be more valuable than some others we've encountered. She gets into the nature of how it's not static. And so one example is menstrual cycle. She says women don't need the same nutrients in the same quantities at all parts of their menstrual cycle. And if we ignore that fact, for instance, and she comments about this, if I am eating, really, really healthy in one part of my menstrual cycle and I eat the exact same way in another part, I'm actually not going to feel great because I'm not eating the right kinds of nutrients. So the quantities of fat and protein, for instance, you need a whole lot more of it in the I think it's called the premenstrual part as opposed to the postmenstrual part. I can't remember which hormone is more prevalent, but you need a whole lot more fat and protein in one phase of your cycle than you do in the other. But if you don't make that adjustment, then you're not going to feel the same throughout, right?
But also it's very tricky. Let's just caveat this. It's really tricky because there's a lot going on in a woman's cycle that can make you feel lousy, not just feeling. So fun.
Yeah.
So fun.
It's how I'm feeling is not always the best. Yeah. Another example, though, is when you're undergoing psychological stress, increased psychological stress, it depletes levels of zinc and magnesium faster. And so if you're in a very stressful period of time, like work, family, or otherwise, something's going on, it might be a good idea to increase intake of magnesium and zinc.
Your eyes twitching.
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
Well,
take some magnesium.
That's often associated with magnesium deficiency.
Oh, I know. I have it.
Muscle twitch. Yeah. And stress produces that. And here's the funny thing, is the author says, why does stress cause? And the answer is apparently they don't know. They're looking into it. They've got some theories. I don't know. Fascinating. Number 3, food is how you communicate with your cells. And so in principle then, by what I'm eating, I'm telling my body to do certain things or not do certain things. And so this is where the resiliency and the adaptivity of our bodies just becomes so interesting. Because if you eat a whole lot of a certain thing, you're telling your body, you're giving it a message about either things are all good and we're well, or things are not good and we need to go into like emergency mode. And the cells are going to respond. They're going to start behaving differently. They're going to start producing certain things differently or consuming certain things differently. And so the principle here that applies is we need to continue to think about the fact that I'm trying to give my body the nutrients that it needs to do what I want it to do and to do what it should be doing. Because if I'm not giving it those nutrients, it's going to start doing things that it shouldn't be doing or that I don't want it to. That's another way to think about it.
And maybe something to note, too, is that a problem with many endurance athletes is underfueling. And let's say you do a long run and it's a really long drive back, and what you're going to have is some sort of protein shake and a snack. Not the best. It's not. There are better ways to consume those nutrients, but it's better for you to get some fuel to start the recovery process than wait until you can have whole foods at home.
Sure. So that's one of the questions that we're going to answer toward the end is like, what are some things that I can do that make this thing a little bit easier? Because otherwise this sounds just like really complicated. I have some ideas because I've been trying out some of this stuff. So we'll talk about that. Now, the next one here, just a couple more at the principle level as we're talking through these things. Extreme food cravings are a kind of feedback from our cells, and we should try to understand that a little bit better. Because what fundamentally tends to be true is that specifically, like craving a certain thing is almost never the thing that we actually need or should want, right? Like those.
I don't know. I crave sometimes I crave a salad. Sometimes I crave like.
Listen, I'm not saying all the time, and you're probably atypical in many ways. But that tells me something. Whatever I'm craving, it tells me something. But it's not always telling me something that it should be. And here's the reason. So, quote from the book: if your body is pushing you to acquire specific foods, that is a signal that your human cells or your microbiome cells' biological needs are not being met. And so then what tends to happen is, as the author is breaking it down, we're feeling a craving for something, and so we feel like we need to be eating something, but that thing is giving us a bunch of stuff that we don't need right now, and the body's thinking, well, I'm not getting enough of it. I need more of that thing that you're not getting, and so the craving just continues. And what they have found in studies is that people tend to experience more cravings for junk. We're talking like treats, sugars, like fried foods, things like that. We experience more cravings for that kind of stuff when we're eating it. And if we stop eating it and eat like good, healthy things, we don't experience cravings for those things eventually. Sometimes it takes a little bit.
I think I will always want chocolate.
Well, she doesn't ever specifically condemn chocolate. So
good.
Now, well, milk chocolate she does, but because it's sugary. And so the fundamental point here is we're not talking about general hunger. We've often said on the show, one of the important things for athletes is when we're feeling hungry, we need to be eating. Eat the stuff that you know your body needs. But when you're feeling hungry, you need to be eating in that general sense. But when I'm like craving this certain thing, that should be like I wonder why I'm craving that thing. And kind of think about that a little bit and see if I can figure out what's going on there. It is true. They have studied much that eating unprocessed foods in general, people report less cravings. Period. Like
say that again. I missed.
Eating unprocessed foods in general, people report less cravings. So they do studies. There's a couple of different ones she references. One is they take a group of people and they say for 2 weeks, and they control everything these people eat. And for 2 weeks, you have to eat all this stuff that we're giving you, and it's not great stuff. For 2 weeks, you have to eat all this stuff we're giving you, and it's great stuff. When they give them the better stuff, they ate more calories in total, but lost weight because it's healthier, right? And also reported feeling satiated and satisfied more consistently and not feeling any specific cravings. These studies have been replicated many times in different kinds of formats. So I think that's really important. Okay, so here's one key thing that she does talk about. Fructose. High quantities of fructose is villainous. It's all over the place in exercise venues. Gatorade, for instance, the goos and the gels and all those things. High quantities of fructose, actually, and we've known this. We've actually talked about it on air that it's important to have multiple sources of sugars when you're trying to do like race fueling. One of the reasons, and I did not realize how specifically how this happened in the cells, but one of the reasons is because fructose itself in high quantities is actually a counter signal to your cells, and they will reduce the production of ATP, which is what you need for energy. ATP is what is produced from glucose. They will decrease the quantity of ATP produced when oversaturated with fructose. And so you actually get the opposite effect. If you're taking in too much fructose in a short period of time, then you're getting less energy from it. Like it's reducing the amount of overall energy you have. And it's spiking your blood glucose levels, which is likely going to produce unpleasant experiences soon after that, unless you're doing a good kind of regular dosage. So there's a whole lot, there's a whole lot to say about the synthetic sugars that we've been injecting into the running scene, but we'll come back to that some other time. Timing also matters, and so like when you're taking in certain things and how much you're taking in, and as far as like running fueling goes in particular, there's some questions around that. We'll talk about more of that as well a little bit later. Okay, 2 more here just very briefly then. Ignore diet philosophies is one of her principles, and just focus on eating good food, like unprocessed food. Part of the reason for that is because every diet is the exact opposite of that diet has also been proven to be healthy. And so you got a diet that says vegan or vegetarian, and the exact opposite of that, the carnivore diets, have also been proven to be healthy in certain ways. You've got a diet that says no carbs, and then a diet that's really heavy in carbs, and they both can be effective.
Low fat.
Yeah.
Low sugar.
Yep. So the whole point is that the diet principle of like highly restrictive specifics around food is just simply unnecessary.
But also part of that, I want to like say what I was just like low fat, low sugar.
Yeah.
That's what's on the packaging of highly processed foods.
Right.
Because some of it can be made with like less fat or less sugar. But what often we're getting is a lot of artificial sweeteners, and we're getting high sugar in the low fat stuff. That's what it typically ends up being. And then other things that are substituting for fat that aren't good for you either. So when I said those, I specifically said them because it's on packaging that is of highly processed foods.
Right. Yeah, it's almost always the case if you look at it, look at a whole fat version of something and a low fat version of the exact same product and look at their ingredients list. And the low fat version has more ingredients and they're things you've never heard of because they're adding things to try to make up for whatever they did to take out the fat. And this goes back to the question of processing foods. Processing foods takes away the good nutrients, or reduces them at least, and adds in bad nutrients. That's exactly what happens when you process foods. Sometimes it's very minimally, and other times it's a whole lot. So that is not good. We want to be diminishing those things. So no, the specifics of the diet are not the point, and we will talk about that here. And then the last one is mindful eating. This is her principle that I just found to be the most strange of all of them. And I was like, yeah, this sounds a little bit more hippie than I'm willing to go myself. Because she started talking about how like she thanks her food for giving her energy. And I'm like, okay, you're welcome to do that. I'm not going to. And that's that.
But we thank God for our food.
We do, because the food doesn't actually know that I'm thanking it. And I know why. So the reason why she says this is because she says what we're doing is we're changing our own thinking about the thing we're doing when we're eating. And we're looking at our plate in front of us and saying, this is good fuel for my body. And I'm so glad to have this good fuel for my body, right? The idea of being grateful. But she directs her gratitude toward really strange things in my mind. Like, why would you thank the plate? Because the plate is inanimate and unresponsive.
I think that the practice, though, of gratitude is
her point.
We glean from this.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yes, it is a conviction, though, for me personally, to be able to say, okay, I could look at my plate of food and I could say, thank you, Lord, for creating this earth that can fuel my body in all of these really interesting and obscure ways. Not to mention, the opportunity and ability to have that plate of food in front of me that day. But often I don't think those ways about it. So,
or the wonderful wife who made it for you.
I have a confession to make on air publicly for everyone before my dear wife, and to ask her forgiveness. Because in the past, this is true. In the past, she has done something like the following. I'm going to give you two examples. One, she has made cookies. She has made them healthily because she has always been one who has thought it is better to eat a thing that is healthier than a thing that is not healthier. And I have said to her in the past, you know where I'm going with this? Mm-hmm. I have said, what's the point in eating a cookie that's healthy? I could just eat a granola bar or something. If I want to eat a cookie, I want to eat an unhealthy cookie because it tastes better. I have said that, and I am so sorry because I am so wrong. That is why I have been so unhealthy about sugar in the past and way overeating desserts in my life. And so, please forgive me for that.
Oh, I'll forgive you. But I still be making like some treats sometimes that are like full on. But
and I'm not going to condemn you for that either.
I do enjoy making things delicious that have nutrition.
Yes.
So that's a goal of mine.
Second apology.
All right.
Remember, I said this too. The second one is Andy has, since we've been married, made a concerted effort to have things like a salad and a good vegetable, like not just canned green beans, although for our boys we often have as well things like canned green beans because they really like them. A good vegetable. And I have often shirked, especially the salads, and just said, I'm just gonna eat more of the other stuff because Salads just feel like a waste of space. And once again, I am so wrong. And I know over the years that has lessened, but I used to do it in particular quite a bit.
Not that long ago.
Well, I would always ignore the salad.
The salad.
But I used to like be annoyed by it. Fairly. Okay, so I am sorry.
I forgive you.
Please forgive me. Thank you. All things are made right. Okay. We needed to get that off our chest because the reality here is when I start talking about the next few things, which are now these specific recommendations, this is where Andy and I have said, like, this is a little bit contentious for us because some of the things she says here is like, I don't want to do what you're recommending, and I'm just not going to, right? And maybe it's stubbornness, maybe it's, I don't know, but I have to avoid, and this is in principle, you're hearing it once again on air, I have to avoid now the mindset where I think Andy should do the healthy things for me so that I eat the healthy things. Because this is not the kind of thing that we should ever be trying to impose on others. That's what I'm stating about this whole rest of the topics now that we're talking about. Because here's what happens. Someone becomes very informed, very knowledgeable about these things, and develops some really good habits, right? And so you can do this, and you are a very healthy person. You've got really healthy habits. But not everybody around you is going to be doing that. And not everyone around you is going to care to do that, even if they knew about those things and could potentially do it. I cannot think poorly of those people who are not doing the things that I'm doing for any reason. Because as soon as I do that, I mentioned earlier the intellectual humility. As soon as I do that, I now am raising myself on a pedestal where I don't belong. And so that is I'm committing to this. I'm going to try very hard, as Andy and I have talked about food and fuel in these weeks that we've been reviewing this material. I do not want to be an imposition. I'm not trying to. But I know that already has felt like that a few times. Trying hard here. So you can hear us debate this some on air. That's where we're going. All right. Let's talk about the specifics. Okay, certain ingredients are bad. Just generally bad. And certain ingredients are really good. And we should try to find the good ones more.
I don't like the terms bad and good.
Yeah, but it's true.
Or you could say
added refined sugar is really bad for your body. And so things with natural sugar, she's got no problem with sugar. She's saying if you go to consume a product where they have taken the product and said, let's make it sweeter by just adding more sugar, that's not good for your body, fundamentally. Your body does not need that much sugar to be successful. Complex carbohydrates have tons of sugars that it breaks down. You get it in so many ways from so many foods. You shouldn't be adding more of it. Now, we're talking about processed sugars. What if I want to make something sweeter? What could I put in it? Andy's got a lot of great ideas already that are good ideas. The author even supports.
Agave, honey, maple syrup.
Natural stuff that is already sweet, that is fundamentally not unhealthy for your body. You can do that. But like fructose syrup or high fructose corn syrup, for example, is very bad for the human body. Like in any quantity. But the problem is if there's any of it in something, there's almost always a lot of it. That's not good. So she has a lot to say about that, but she's not going crazy here. She's just saying this stuff is not good for you. Don't eat it. There's no nutritional value at all, and that's probably worth thinking about. Okay, we're going to talk about performance, by the way, in a little bit, because some of these things we have to think about a little bit differently when we're in performance mindset, like in a race, for instance. The next one is, she says, avoid refined grains. Now, this is one where we're like, I don't know how far you're going to take this, because she's talking about like any kind of flour made from any kind. And she kind of goes a little bit crazy. At one point, she's like, well, oats really aren't that great. But then she kind of hedges and she's like, actually, oats are kind of fine, but you just shouldn't eat them anyway. And so she's got a little bit of personal bias she's bringing into this. She admits it here, where she's like, I just don't see the point in eating grains because you get that nutrition from other things. And it is nutritional, but it's like not a lot of the nutrition. So just eat other stuff. And I'm like, no, grains are a staple. And like, it's so hard to eat good quantities, like good calorie quantities of food and fuel our bodies well if we eat no grains. So I don't support her premise here. But I do see, as she was starting to outline, it's like, okay, there are particular grains that are best to avoid. I'm not talking, I'm never going to eat these things again, but I'm going to diminish the amount of bleached white flour that I eat, for instance. I think that's probably a good idea. Okay. And then she mentioned chia pudding in that, and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. We happen to have chia seeds, and so I made some chia pudding last night. I wanted to test this so I could talk about it on air. Made it last night because it has to sit in the fridge overnight, and then I ate it before my long run today, and I thought it was great. Andy thought it was disgusting.
I did not like it. And we didn't just happen to have chia seeds. I buy chia seeds
I know,
to put in stuff.
That's what I mean. We happen to have them because Andy buys them.
But I like them too. I just don't like them like that.
Chia
they just
pudding.
taste like mush.
It does, and I love it. I love mush. All right, so that was good. Okay. Refined vegetable or seed oils are not great for our bodies. Now, a lot of you are going to say, I've heard this seed oil craze, and it's been debunked, which it probably has by studies, funded by big agricultural firms that happen to produce a lot of seed oils. Anyway, her point is not like seed oils are killing everyone and they're giving everyone cancer. She doesn't say that. She just says that, one, they are inflammatory and in nature, and so they're going to cause an increase general inflammation. Usually it's very, very minimal, but they do that, which isn't great. Also, they have no nutritional value. You don't get nutrition from refined seed oils because the nutrition's been refined out of them. So she's like, just do things like avocado oil and olive oil and butter. Like, that's all better than seed oils. And so just do something different is better for us. Okay, I think that's fine. Oh, interesting fact. A little statistic she threw in there. Soybean oil is the largest source of calories for Americans as of 2023.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Really? Not sugar?
Soybean oil. Because it's in so many things. She actually started to list, like, it's in almost everything that you eat that is not just like raw foods.
Huh. That's it. Very interesting.
Yeah. Wild, huh? Apparently there's a reason why it's connected to the Farm Bill, big agricultural subsidies. But anyway, I didn't look into it any further than that. Okay, so how about if those are things we should try to avoid or minimize, what should we be seeking out? Well, okay, fruits and veggies. Okay, not very complicated here. Nuts and seeds are really, really good. They have a number of particular things that are very important for our bodies, and if we eat lots of them, we're better for it. All right, so that's good. Legumes and beans, no surprise there. Good meats, like pasture-raised, grass-fed, things that aren't like highly hormonalized. Yeah, we know that. Wild fish. Shout out to Net to Table Seafoods.
Yeah.
If you're looking for some wild Alaskan salmon.
I should tell them about my code. I didn't write this in there, but okay, so it's nettottableseafoods.com. It's wild seafood. It's not just salmon, but it's other types of Alaskan seafoods. It's the best you can get on the planet.
Andy's biased.
It's
her brother's company.
It's actually true though
but it is the best.
It is the best. On the planet. It is the absolute best. Anyway, but you can get $40 off.
Whoa.
A to Z 40. So
Okay.
it's A to TOZ 40.
ATOZ 40. You get 40% off.
No, $40.
Okay, I was like, what?
Which is
$40 off, and which could be actually more than 40% off.
It
depending
depends
on
on
what
what
you're
you get.
ordering. So, and they've got it, and so you get frozen. They'll ship it to you frozen, and it's
but it's like
the best
it is
stuff.
the freshest. Some people have a really misconstrued idea of fresh and frozen.
You are not supposed you're not supposed to eat fresh fish from a store. It's not as good as frozen fish.
If they say that these are fresh fish and they're not frozen, they have been thawed already, which is not good.
It's not good.
It all gets flash frozen.
Yep.
Okay. And the stuff that Net to Table has, they actually do it themselves, right? Like they pull out the best salmon and they flash freeze it, which means it's the absolute freshest that you get.
Like they catch the fish themselves. So this is the point you're supposed to be hearing here. Luke, Andy's brother, catches the fish himself. He has an operation
he has
in
a crew.
Alaska, multiple boats, multiple net operations. They catch the fish and then they freeze it right after they catch it It doesn't get fresher than that.
It doesn't.
Also, it doesn't get any better than that.
It tastes so good.
It's the best seafood on the planet.
Yeah.
So
that turned into a longer.
Casey Means is recommending that you go to Net to Table Seafoods. That's nettotableseafoods.com and use that code ATOZ40 to get $40 off.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so glad you said that. So, last one. She talked about water. She's like, hey, by the way, water, like from your tap or your well, either or, doesn't matter what type of water. Sorry, I said tap. Municipal water or well water, doesn't matter. It has lots of stuff in it that is not generally good for us to consume in high quantities. And since you're drinking lots of water, because you are drinking lots of water, remember that. Since you're doing that, your water should be filtered. But it's best to be drinking filtered water. And so the reverse osmosis filters, they're not terribly expensive. They're all over the place. And most of you probably actually have one and don't even know it. A lot of the time that is the case.
Sometimes there's filters in your fridge, but I don't know how good those are.
It depends. Some of them are RO and many are not. So go that route is her suggestion. All right, now let's talk some of her then particulars as we were noting through those goods and bads. Potatoes are not on her list anywhere. And I don't know why. They're not on the good list and they're not on the bad list. She actually does bring up potatoes at one point.
Fantastic starch.
But yeah, it's like, there's how am I getting the right kinds of calories that I need? And so, that good list is going to give you what you need. But if you need to add a few things in here and there, you're probably going to find some refined grains now and then, and that's okay. But potatoes are also a good thing to throw in there. We didn't mention eggs. She just lumped them in with the meats category. Eggs are really good for the body. First, they are by themselves a complete amino acid profile.
Yeah.
So you get
wild Alaskan salmon.
Yes, that's true. You get 100% of the protein enzymes your body needs from eggs.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is great. But also eggs have a number of other things in them that are particularly helpful. Okay. We talked about that. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of order here. I rambled.
He has a lot of information, guys.
Yeah.
We might want to split it into two.
No. We're good because we have presented to you the point about food, which is it's fuel, and it's fuel in a cellular sense, which I think is a nice added lens. I never really quite got to the point of trying to think about it in this way previously. But when we say we're fueling ourselves, we say that you're giving your cells the things that they need to be what they are and to do what they do. And that's it. That's like 100% of what it means to fuel our bodies. And then, of course, the cascading effects of what those cells are doing. And so the reason I think this is important as I'm making decisions for my own eating habits is because I want my body to do what it needs to do well and to feel good while it's doing it. And that's what it means to fuel well also.
And I think the other consideration with food is that food really isn't just fuel. In our culture, it is also a way that brings people together. When you go to people's houses.
We just had dinner with family tonight.
Birthday parties.
Yep.
Things of that nature. Food is also culture. Food is community. And so having it be loose-handed, like, yes, I think at home I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to do the best I can, but also realizing that for many of us who want to thrive and live balanced lives, we're maybe going to be a little bit more open-handed about it and just, yeah.
See, isn't it just
have moderation?
You so glad Andy is here? It's so much better when she is a check and a balance for Zach's idealism.
Am I going to get pizza still? Yes.
We are still doing pizza night with the family on our Sunday night pizza night. We're doing it, and we're going to eat it. But I'm probably not going to eat pizza 3 days a week.
We don't do that.
We're still gonna go.
We don't do that.
I sometimes am inclined to want to do that.
Okay.
And we're still going to go to restaurants occasionally with friends or on dates ourselves. And fundamentally, you can find restaurants that have really good menus, and most just don't. They've got okay menus where you're able to get some good stuff, but you're also going to get some not good stuff in that meal, and that's okay. Because that's the compromise. So we said this when we opened up this discussion in the previous episode. We said fundamentally the mindset we all need to have around this kind of stuff is that there always is a compromise happening. The question is, am I aware of when I'm making the compromise, and am I doing so with some careful deliberation? And so this is where we don't want to be the kind of people who fall into this like, oh, wow, for the last 6 months, I've been eating donuts like 4 days a week, and I just somehow fell into that habit, and I'm not quite sure why, but I've been doing it now for months. It's like, don't do that. Don't do that. Just, make the compromise deliberately when you make it. And therefore you'll probably make it not quite as often, not quite as severely as my thinking. And there's so much to be said about, about the creature comforts, and Andy's comfort is all being stolen away by. Okay, here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you just a couple now. These are the specific examples of what types of things in each category do we need for certain reasons. And I'm just going to quick go through these. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about those other areas, which are brief. We only have a little bit to say about the other main areas. So what?
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you sure we shouldn't just split it?
No, Andy really wants me to stop talking now.
Because sleep is also important for
this conversation. But it's really simple too, okay. Though. There's not a lot to be said. Okay, so let's talk about beans and lentils. We need to eat more of them. We do, because they provide a whole bunch of nutrition. I know. Andy bought, what was it, a 25-pound bag of lentils?
A massive bag of lentils, and I'm the only one in the family who will eat it.
No. Every time you've made them, I've enjoyed it, and
But you don't eat the leftovers.
Oh, I didn't know about them. All right, so Andy bought this 25-pound bag of lentils, and she's like, "Look, I got a bag of lentils." And my first thought was, "What are lentils? Why did you buy that?" She's like, "I think I could make lentil soup." And I was like, 25 pounds of it? That's, wow. But here's the thing. They're actually really good for you also. And I was just at a restaurant. Yeah, I don't know, at a restaurant. I was just at a restaurant, and they said you could get a pita or you could get the rice and lentils. And I was like, rice and lentils? They said, yeah, we just have a rice and lentils mix. I was like, that's what I want. That's awesome. And it was really good. And I'm thinking Andy was right all along.
I did buy that bag of lentils because a nutritionist had suggested that runners should be eating lentils. So that wasn't just a random purchase. It was a purchase with intent to do some healthy fueling.
Yeah, so lentils bear a number of significant nutritional benefits, and they are super cheap for in terms of caloric, cost. There's a lot of foods here on this list that you're going to say, that is really expensive. I can't be eating a lot of that stuff. And the answer is that's true. So what are the things that aren't? And one example is beans and lentils. So good stuff. All right, how about micronutrients? What do we need to get the kinds of micronutrients our body needs? We're talking about vitamins and minerals and things like that. Fatty fish, like salmon, eggs, mushrooms, they're all great sources of vitamin D. Solid stuff. How about nuts, seeds, spinach? All good sources of magnesium. Brazil nuts, turkey, chicken, eggs, selenium. By the way, you're going to see foods show up multiple times on the list. There's a reason for that. I mentioned eggs are good for you because they're good for a lot of reasons. All right, beef, beans. There's your zinc. So eat those beans and lentils. Brown rice, pork, beans, eggs, chicken, avocados, chickpeas, potatoes, spinach, milk are all good sources of certain B vitamins. And there's a lot of B vitamins that you need. So you got to eat a lot of different things to get them. So now potatoes did show up. I knew they showed up somewhere. Okay, so those are some good sources of micronutrients. How about antioxidative foods? This has been coming up a ton. So the reason why you need antioxidants is because the free radicals that your body produces when you're under stress, physical, psychological, emotional, any kind of stress, your body's producing free radicals. Those cause inflammation, among other problems. And antioxidative foods reduce the free radicals circulating in your body, and sometimes with the cell membrane linings inhibit the transfer of free radicals between certain types of cells.
When you're marathon training or training in general, I know not everyone's a marathon runner who listens to this podcast, but I think of the amount of time and strain that marathon training brings to a family and a person. Yeah. And I think, I think they're probably going to experience more stress. Also, a higher fueling need.
Yeah.
So it is important to think about these things in more than just like, okay, am I eating enough? But am I eating enough that's going to be helping reduce my stress and nourish me in the ways I need to be nourished?
So what are some good antioxidative foods? Well, there's actually like a huge list. I think it's like 100 that she puts that are like, these are some of the top recommendations, not her own, but just in general. And so it's not hard to get antioxidants is the point. But here are some that stood out to me because I was like, oh, those are really easy to get and eat in different ways. Almonds, apples, artichokes, asparagus. Those are my A ones. Black beans, broccoli, capers, cherries, ginger, black tea, green tea, peaches, pecans, or do you say pecans? Pistachios, red onion, spinach, turmeric, and walnut, among many others. So you can see it's not hard to get antioxidants. And you notice that nuts and vegetables showed up a lot on that list.
Yeah.
Because they do. Those are really good things for you. How about when you are eating, what should you eat and in what order? Does it matter? And the answer is it actually does. Because when you are eating, you should not eat carbs by themselves in general because it just spikes your blood glucose levels. We've known that. We've known that for a long time. The reason why is because carbs break down the fastest of any other type of food. And when you don't have other things near and around them and with them, they break down even faster. And so it's good for quick energy, but it also, spiking your blood glucose levels causes a kind of insulin response that is not great for you. And so the less you can do that in general in life, the better you will be overall. And so she talks about, okay, well, just when you're going to eat things like fruit, eat it with something that has protein or fiber. And that's great. Some fruit has fiber as well, and so that kind of helps with that already by itself. But also, it's just easy to add nuts to anything. You know, just a handful of nuts with anything you're eating. So if you're going to
He's really into nuts lately.
I am, but that's because she keeps talking about them in the book, because it's just so easy to get your hands on some raw nuts. You don't have to do anything to make them. You don't have to. Oh, Andy.
Continue.
She's about to fall apart. You all know, what I just did. All right. So the point here now is if you combine something with those carbohydrates, it's actually going to do a better thing for you energy-wise. It's also going to process and digest better. So it's not a problem to eat the carbohydrates, but it's a problem to eat them by themselves. Then the answer is when you're eating, eat the fiber and protein stuff first. Not only, we're not talking about eat your meal in like these restrictive sections, but like when I start eating a meal, why is it that they always give you the salad first in a multiple course meal? Who knows? But
someone knew something.
Someone knew something hundreds of years ago, because that process started hundreds of years ago. Someone knew that you should actually eat the fibers and the proteins before you eat the carbohydrates, because then the carbohydrates will absorb with the other foods. Fiber slows down the absorption of all nutrients, not in a negative sense, although it can be a negative in certain
for running and
GI distress moments. Don't eat a whole big huge salad before your long run, because now that fiber is doing other things you don't want. But this is giving us a good sense of when you eat certain things, they do certain things, and fiber slows down the absorption of nutrients. It also helps with certain kinds of nutrient production, and so to other foods. And so you've heard about things like why does fiber sometimes give me gas? Well, the answer is because fiber ferments other foods, not all of them, but certain foods ferments them in your digestive tract, and that actually is a good thing for you nutritionally because it provides some other nutrition. But then there's a byproduct, and it's stinky gas.
Unfortunate.
And so you have to be aware of that too.
Others are also aware when that happens.
Yeah. So when you go to a restaurant, one of the most common things they're going to give you for an appetizer is a loaf of bread or a roll. Don't eat it first. Don't do it, Andy.
If I'm at Logan's,
ask
I'm
them
doing it.
to give you the bread with your meal. Better yet, eat your salad. So ask them to bring your salad out right away. Eat your salad and your bread, and now you're in a much better place.
When they're all warm and buttery, I just don't know.
But they can bring it out anytime. You don't have to eat it before you eat other things.
What if they bring it to you as soon as you sit down? And it's like, these are
You
just
can
really...
reject it. You can say,
I
would like that later.
Or you could just make a choice saying, like, this is a really good thing, and I don't want to miss out.
It's a really bad thing for your blood sugar. All right. Well, yeah, we get it. Okay. Lastly, if there's a lastly here, fiber is so good in general. And one of the things the author says is when she's working with clients, she'll often just do one intervention. I need you to eat more fiber for the next 2 weeks. And she'll give them some amount, like eat this stuff every day for 2 weeks. And every single time, their health markers improve. Wow. She's like, it's just, and now this wouldn't be true for every single human because many of you eat enough fiber. Her point is most people don't eat enough fiber. And as soon as you start eating a good quantity of fiber every day, you are seeing improvements in other health markers.
Great.
That's a good sign. Yep. I didn't eat enough fiber. I was like a only carbs all the time kind of guy.
Bagel guy.
Yeah. So you all know.
Very specific.
You know that I used to eat 2 bagels with peanut butter every morning for breakfast. I had done that for years. We were in the vicinity of decades worth of years. I do not do that anymore because it turns out that is part of the reason why I feel tired in the morning, like around lunchtime. And it's not at all good for me to do that. But I love peanut butter bagels. So
I still will have that before running because I think it's
I didn't say
for me
not
to digest.
I didn't say not to.
Yeah.
But having the peanut butter on the bagel does help with that whole
I know.
Don't eat carbs by themselves thing. So it is actually, there are worse things. There are worse things. Okay, here's another one. Dessert in the evening is really bad for overall health. My mom used to say, she still does this, but she used to say she can't eat dessert after dinner because it makes her feel sick, which it does. And so she would always eat her dessert before dinner, like in the afternoon. And I just always thought that was really funny. And now it turns out there's actually specific reasons why that would be a better habit. Now the author, of course, as you know, is going to say stop eating dessert. But her point is if you're eating dessert, don't eat it in the evening after dinner. That's like the worst time to eat dessert. Just find other times of the day and it's better. Okay. You get it. We've talked through it. And I think fundamentally, when we think about food in terms of fuel and communicating to my body what I need you to do. Body, I need you to do these things for me. And the food I'm eating is what's telling that. It's not the other stuff. The other stuff is helping, but the food is the main thing. And so how can I think about these things from that perspective, and how can that help improve my overall health? And next time we're with you, next time you hear from us, we're going to talk about sleep and light and natural body rhythms throughout the day. We're going to talk about temperature and what effects significant temperature swings have on our body. We're going to talk about movement and exercise, but exercise is not the only part of the equation. And is it really truly not enough to just run in the morning? Are there other kinds of movement that I should be thinking about? And toxicity. And we're going to talk about what are we putting on our skin. We're talking about the air we're breathing. We're going to talk about the things in our environment and how can I think well about those things. And that is another example of Zach listening to Andy and
good job, honey.
Demonstrating how she is always right.
Wow. That's a way to end an episode right there.
So we've told you food is important, and we have told you a little bit about what we do in response to some of these thoughts. We're going to share more of that next time as well. What is it that Zach and Andy are trying to do in our lives to improve some of the things we can improve? Well, we'll bring that to you. And if you have missed it, we're sharing running news and a different episode each week, and we've got more of that coming at you in the next time around. So stay tuned. Follow us on YouTube especially, and we're on Spotify, any place you listen to podcasts. Our podcast is on all the platforms, and we post and share content in some of the social medias as well. And then make sure you head to AtoZrunning.com to find out more about our services and what we do for runners and how we try to help you as a runner.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.